His live stream since I was trying to get everything ready, and I was going to try to record a few today, and it just everything got caught up. So wanted to join you guys on a Saturday evening and interrupt your college football perhaps to get ready for the Houston Texans wearing their battle red candied helmets tomorrow, which are badass with the blue color rush uniforms. I don't usually get excited about uniform stuff, but I'm super excited about this. It's a battle of teams that have super red uniforms tomorrow. Bubba Homeschool, good to see you. Thank you, my friend, for being here. So I don't like positioning games as quarterback versus quarterback, but there's so much symmetry here that I feel like we have to talk about the fact that Kyler Murray is a former rookie of the year going up against CJ Stroud, a probable rookie of the year. I mean, it's getting to be the point where even if for some reason CJ didn't play any more than a couple more games, he'd probably get rookie of the year. And the praise is so unanimous that it's kind of eerie. But I think that Kyler Murray is a good cautionary tale, perhaps, for just how quickly things can fall, particularly when it comes to quarterbacks. I think there's reasons that CJ's success is a little bit more firmly planted in the ground, where Kyler Murray was based a lot on athleticism his rookie year and on an offense that, perhaps wasn't going to endure. I'm talking about Cliff Kingsbury. So with Kyler Murray, he finds himself a couple years after winning rookie of the year in a spot where he's fighting now to prove that uh, he's a better guy than Caleb Williams, or he's a better quarterback than Drake May, and B, if he wins enough games, it's a moot point anyway because he's the guy. And I think he's a guy that's shown brilliant flashes. He's a guy that has had steady stretches of games. A couple years ago, he had 6-7 games in a row where he was playing astoundingly well. He just hasn't been that consistent. So it's Kyler Murray, who I'm kind of pulling for one, because he's in the NFC, so I don't have to worry about it. But I always felt that it was a little too easy for the Cardinals, who are now in a known and documented dysfunctional organization. I mean, there are there are objective survey results. I guess the survey questions are subjective, but the results of the survey of the players show that the Cardinals are a mess. Ownership is embroiled in several scandals. So it's a bit of a mess over there. And I think Kyler Murray was in some ways blamed for some of Cliff Kingsbury's shortcomings. I don't think that place was operated like an actual NFL franchise. I don't think that operated the way that, for instance, Demeco Ryans is operating the NFL team, to say nothing of the actual offense itself. So I am pulling for Kyler Murray from week 12 onwards. For those of you who are brought here by the algorithm, I'm Seth Payne. I played for the Houston Texans, so this is going to be a super biased appraisal of this matchup. I'm super, super bullish on CJ Stroud. I want to be bullish on Kyler Murray. I think he has matured a lot. I think there have been some interviews I watched this week and some things that people have talked about with him. I think he's grown. I think he's been through the ringer a little bit. So we'll watch some of his film, and we'll listen to some of the things people are saying about both these guys. Let me check these real quick. As far as injury stuff, we're going to go through that together after we go through some of this. What's the plan defensively? Predominantly zone containment on the line with a sprinkle of spy game. Spy game is the really interesting one. So as we get into some of the audio here, we'll talk about the matchups afterwards. The spy game without Denzel Perryman gets a little bit trickier. I think that Cashman is plenty athletic. Christian is plenty athletic. I think that they're just a little thin at linebacker right now. So the safeties come into play too. They might end up playing more nickel than you might otherwise think. See how they can stop versus this offense, where I think you have to worry about Kyler Murray's legs first and foremost above everything else. And they're this little tight end, this big tight end, McBride. He's a headache. So we'll get into that. The first couple bits of audio I want to play are let's get rid of that. Mike Martz. One more question. We got to get into JJ after this too. This stuff. Okay. So Mike Martz, former offensive coordinator and head coach for the Rams, is in the NFL for like 40 years. And Greg Cosell, from NFL Films Guru, both guys who have been around the NFL forever. Like, I wanted to play some of the things they're saying about CJ Stroud because these guys don't dole out gushing praise all that quickly or easily, and they've seen it all. I think when they speak about things in an historical context, you can trust them. So first, Mike Martz. This was on the 33rdteam.com, and it's pretty big praise for CJ Stroud. I added some video over it. I'm flexing my newfound editing skills.
I've never seen anything like him. Not Brady, not anybody. I've never seen anybody like CJ Stroud. Through my time in football, I've never seen a rookie quarterback play at this level. Had this kind of control, quickness of delivery, accuracy, arm strength, all the change up. He lays one in there down the sideline, and then he'll throw a shot in there. He's got everything. He does everything. Modest, humble, guys love him. He's at his best when things are at their worst. You know, he's at his best under pressure. He just doesn't blink. And then the throws are so accurate. They hit guys in full stride. I mean, you have to catch him. You got no choice.
Yeah, you have to catch him. I love that. You have to catch him. You have no choice. It's almost Mart's an old school hard ass. I think. Like I could see him yelling at a receiver for not catching some of the passes that CJ has thrown. I think the part where he said that he's his best under pressure. That's the part that I think so many people were concerned about in his scouting report was just how is he going to be under the blitz and under pressure. And early in the season, there were some signs that he looked like a rookie. Right now, he's incredible when blitzed. And then when pressured, I don't think the numbers even really accurately reflect how good he's been because he's also been very judicious about throwing the ball away, and much more so than most rookies. He's not worried about throwing incompletions. He's not worried about having a low completion percentage. And he's pushing the ball downfield, 8+ yards per attempt, as he's thrown only 2 interceptions on the year. Like it's really, really, really good. As somebody in the comments pointed out, Drew Brees has done a couple. Drew Brees is a YouTuber now, and he's done 2 videos on CJ Stroud. Like Dan Orlovsky, I showed you guys that video of that earlier this year. Like former NFL quarterbacks just can't get over how advanced CJ is. After we get through some of the stuff for tomorrow, we'll watch Bobby Slowick's press conference, or at least a few of the choice answers. This is from Greg Cassell. Greg Cassell, who equally is as impressed with the physical stuff as he is the mental stuff.
CJ Stroud's become one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch. Now, there's a guy that sees it right away. He even sees it when there's disguise and late rotation, which we've seen a number of times the last couple of weeks, where the defense has done a lot of that, which is what defenses do to young quarterbacks. It has not impacted Stroud in a negative way at all. He's got such a quick, compact delivery. He's an accurate passer, very precise with his ball location. He just looks really comfortable playing quarterback.
Okay, so that was on the Ross Tucker podcast, of course. My good friend Ross, great follow great follow to watch his podcast, but also on Twitter and whatnot. He also he's doing a lot of color commentary now. But like Greg Cassell with NFL Films forever, like he does not dish out praise lightly. He's also been pretty critical of Kyler Murray in the past. I could tell everybody's been kind of treating Kyler Murray with kid gloves after his first week back, where he had a good performance. But I think everybody's just kind of waiting to see how he fits in this offense and how he goes through. Kyler Murray spoke about being a little bit rusty and not quite mentally fully indoctrinated into this new offense, but we'll get to that in a little bit. This play, as Greg was talking about, adjusting to disguised coverages and rotating safeties and all of that. If you look at this screenshot here, this is the play, the throw to Dalton Schultz on that final field goal drive. If you look at that defensive back, that dude was up at the line showing blitz, and I can't remember if Greg talked about it in the clip I showed or not, but he referenced this play. This guy was up at the line. This is him bailing out like right at the snap. So this is all happening at the snap. And you can see Dalton Schultz is up there in the number 2, second from the top. And CJ knew exactly what was going on, where to go with it. Got to Dalton Schultz, no problem. He's really nails when it comes to a lot of the stuff that teams try to do to flummox a rookie. Like CJ's just passed the test every step along the way. It's really, really cool. His ability to create space for himself is pretty good. Yeah. Put a spy on Murray, make him throw to win. Don't let him run and create. I think Miko will be ready for his quick feet. What's wrong with Petrie is my question, not the player he was. I wonder if the absence of Jimmy Ward and combined with all the other change back there might have a little something to do with it. Let's see what Demeco. Let's see. I don't want to. I keep blocking these guys out. Okay. Demeco spoke about Kyler Murray on the Wednesday press conference. Where'd you go, Demeco? There we go.
Cardinals, I think it starts with Kyler Murray. First and foremost, getting him back. You talk about an explosive, dynamic playmaker, the quarterback position, one of the premier athletes in the NFL right now. Does a really good job passing the football, but as we all know, him with his scramble ability, that's what won them the game this past week.
Yeah. So, you could take that as a backhanded compliment, I suppose, if you're from Arizona and Demeco's saying that it was his scrambling ability, but it was. He made some really nice throws. He had some rough ones. I'll show those while Kyler's talking next. But he was admittedly rusty. There were some really curious underthrows. There were some misfires. He was behind receivers at times, but he also made some really, really nice throws. Trey McBride too. I'll show some of him. Trey McBride, the second-year tight end. He's an angry elf. He's a feisty one. I like him. I'm gonna hate him on Sunday, but I like him right now for his feistiness. I think they might have something there. The concern about that is that Texans have really, really struggled versus tight ends, and now down a linebacker. I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm not super nervous about it because CJ is capable of winning a relative shootout. Not that a tight end typically turns things into a shootout, but Kyler also did. He had who went over 100 yards? One of the two guys. Anyway, he was spreading it around a certain amount last week. So the tight end, though, is still going to be concerned. I think this is going to be Kyler Murray. No. This is let's see what we have. Okay. I believe this is Trey McBride. Yeah. So that was late in the game. Underthrow, but Trey McBride competed for it. That's about the only time right there that I saw Trey McBride actually go down without a fight. He's trucking people, lowering shoulders, getting up and preening afterwards. This is why I really wish Jimmy Ward were around. I feel like these two would really be just destroying him. But look at this throw by Kyler Murray. And that's with the tight end losing his footing a little bit. See how angry he is? He's super angry. More anger right here. So Trey McBride is the biggest thing I think you have to worry about other than Kyler Murray's legs. The Arizona defense is not so hot in terms of scoring, in terms of pass defense, very, very bad. The rush defense is just so. I errantly said that they were a atrocious rushing defense during the week this week. They're not. They're so. So there's really not anything threatening as of late, but it's impossible to say because look, quarterbacks kind of matter, and I do think that Kyler Murray might be not just a rejuvenated quarterback, but think about when Mike Vick went to, and it's a poor comparison because obviously Mike Vick was older and went through some serious stuff. But when Mike Vick went to Philadelphia and was in Andy Reid's offense, he became a different quarterback. And Andy Reid's one of the best all time. But I do think that there's something to be said for coming from Cliff Kingsbury's offense, which never really genuinely developed into what I think a lot of us hoped that it would be. Was Kyler Murray the limiting factor there, or was it that Cliff Kingsbury wasn't good at bringing him along? I know the iPad hours and all that stuff. But it's just that's going to be the big experiment. Here's Kyler talking about his rustiness?
No, I'm pretty comfortable with it. I will say,
He was asked, let me back this up a little bit. All right, so Kyler was asked how he feels in this new offense, just getting the actual physical reps and whether he's comfortable with it yet.
No, I'm pretty comfortable with it. I will say, being in a different offense for the past 4 years, it was new. It was definitely new. A lot of, terminology and stuff like that, being out there, seeing a certain coverage and, thinking back to like old habits or things that we would do. But at the same time, being in the moment and not not being able to go to what I would normally go to, having to stay with what we're doing now. There's definitely some old habits that want to creep back in when you're out there.
Okay, I got excited with that just because let's go. All right, Demeco, let's go ahead and just try to glitch things up as much as possible. If you're thinking, hey, Demeco's got a lot of experience versus Kyler Murray, not necessarily as a coordinator. Because of injuries, Demeco in his 2 years as coordinator was only faced Kyler Murray once and had an okay game. But like obviously he was also there for the 2 previous years. So he's seen a good amount of Kyler. I think the big concern with Kyler, just like it's going to be with any mobile quarterback, is exactly whether you allow that quarterback to take your edge off your pass rush or the bite out of your pass rush and your edge rushers. I think that just based on Lamar Jackson in week 1, which wasn't peak Lamar Jackson, he wasn't feeling it. Like actually, there's a lot of similarities with week 1 because Lamar Jackson was in a new offense and I think wasn't quite peak, dual threat running, passing quarterback. But Will Anderson and John Grenard and those other defensive ends are pretty good and disciplined about playing their responsibilities and understand when they got to play the run, when they got to rush. And I feel pretty good about that. Like those Grenard, actually, that was one thing that impressed me out of college with him. And my old defensive line coach was his defensive line coach, both at Louisville and Florida, right? But he, a coordinator at Florida. He, Grenard was very disciplined and good at reading in college. And then in the NFL, when it comes to zone read and stuff, he's actually gotten pretty good at baiting people into making the wrong read. Like he'll jab his foot uphill, force the quarterback to keep or force the quarterback to hand off and then make the tackle. So Will Anderson is equally savvy like that against the run. So I actually feel pretty good about that with my fingers crossed. But again, he's a wild card. We saw Kyler Murray scramble. We saw his ability to run for that touchdown. It's like you can do everything right and still be wrong. And I think it was Demeco Ryans that said you gotta rush him twice. You gotta tackle him twice because he's gonna have that second effort on plays. Okay, so Matt Burke. This is Matt Burke on Kyler. If you haven't seen the scramble that Kyler Murray had on the final drive, I cut it up into 2 just because he scrambled for so long that I don't want to get demonetized on this one. It's a very, very long play.
He's not afraid to sort of like give ground to gain ground type thing. Like some guys don't want to bail and do. I mean, he'll go back. That play against Atlanta last week, that third down scramble that he had. I mean, he went back 20 yards back just to go 10 yards forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean, Matt Burke. It sucks. It's a pain in the ass. And Matt, okay, we talk about familiarity. Matt Burke was in Arizona with Kyler and JJ. So, but not when. Let's see, was Matt Burke only in Arizona for 1 year? So he wasn't when he's not all that familiar with Kyler Murray. This is the one part I have not looked into this at all to find out the backstory to this. But in the press conference, Kyler Murray was being asked about Josh Dobbs and his performance going up to Minnesota and, learning the offense on the fly. And Kyler Murray was very gracious about it and complimented him and said nice things. Just remember, Josh Dobbs was playing and won a game for the Cardinals this year. But then this writer, I'd like to know if there's anybody from Arizona in here at all right now. Let me know what this writer's deal is, because listen to the way he phrases this when talking about Josh Dobbs.
What was your reaction to just what he's done twice now this season with all the talk with you and all learning the new, and then he comes and does this twice? It's got to be pretty surprising.
What are we talking about? Are we talking about the Vikings?
What's that?
Are we talking about the Vikings? Like,
Well, he coming here too.
yeah.
So it happened twice.
What happened twice?
I'm just curious what your thoughts on that is.
I'm happy for him. I'm happy for him. We're 2-8. We gotta keep going though.
I don't. What was that? Well, I feel like he was trying as hard as he could to be gracious and talk about the guy that was there, and people were, people are all excited about Dobbs, because that's what happens with quarterbacks when they go and have any success elsewhere. Kyler Murray said a lot of the right things in that press conference, and I feel like that. I feel like that writer was testing him. Am I overly sensitive on his behalf or not? Let's see. What a dumb question. Okay, Jacob. Yeah, good. All right. As far as JJ goes, I think I have the video of JJ, the full interview on Pat McAfee, but I don't have time to do it tonight. JJ was on Pat McAfee, and the clips that made the rounds of him talking about how he's squatting a lot and he could come back, those sound super serious, like he could totally do it. But then he also said the exact same thing he's been saying the whole time, which is that he has not run at all. And I don't think that currently, or at least when he gave that interview on McAfee, I don't think he had any tiny bit in his mind that wanted to play. But I do wonder, when he said he hadn't run at all, but all of a sudden he's lifting again, I like when he's at one of these fancy workout facilities, I think he's going to get timed in like a 5:10.5 or a 40 or something, and just don't run a 40, JJ. Don't run a 40, you'll pull a hammy. But one of the short shuttles or something, or maybe he'll do a couple little drills, some get offs to see where he is relative to where he used to be. And I'm not saying it's out of the question. I just think the fact that he was so banged up, he did have a bunch of sacks last year. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not thinking about it right now. Boy, I don't think he would have expected the Texans to be doing what they are right now. They're 5-2 in their last 7 games. All right. He might. Okay, I just talked myself into it. You guys are bastards. I don't want to think about this. Let's see. To me, it seems like he knows too much to come back, is missing the rush of it all, especially when there's a chance at a playoff run, man. Our secondary will have to stay sticky in coverage. Yes. If Watt gears up, energy is selling out instantly. You should make a business deal out of it. Oh, man. I'm not going to coax him. Okay, 18 solos, tackles, 12.5 sacks last season. He was a pass rush specialist. That's some old school. Who was the tall, skinny defensive end for the Bucks? That was all about getting tackled, or all about getting sacks and not that many tackles. Just need him to run 5 yards at a time. I know it's okay. This is what I'll say about that. Like, I haven't been a guy I've been. I'll keep that up so you can see. Okay. I had a bunch of surgeries, kind of like JJ, like had some pretty catastrophic injuries towards the end of my career. I think that each time that I came back, and I was never as fast as JJ, obviously, but like each time I came back, it took that much longer to get anywhere close to where I was before. But JJ did have double-digit sacks that last year that he was healthy. And I always wondered whether he would want to just come back and be a 265-pound defensive end. I will say this. He has not lost as much weight as you think. I think that, he told me it's just, he hasn't lost as much weight as you think. And I think part of it is he stopped training his neck, so he doesn't look as big. But like he's still training and everything. And sometimes when you're doing, even if he's using slightly lighter weights, but he's doing more reps, that kind of pumps you up more like a bodybuilder. The more you do volume instead of super heavy weights, then you can actually build more muscle mass, and he might be kind of walking around pumped up all the time. So doing that and being the same body weight he was, yeah, you guys are bastards. Now I can't be thinking about this. I can't be thinking about JJ coming back. We gotta stay focused, everybody. We gotta stay focused on the Arizona Cardinals. We're falling into that trap. All right. This is just like there are trap games amongst players. For fans, there are there are trap hypotheticals, and JJ's a trap hypothetical right now, being seduced by Pat McAfee, being seduced by a sometimes portly, sometimes chiseled former kicker who wears sleeveless shirts on television. Let's see. All right. So to get to the other football stuff here, these are going to come fast and furious, and I have no idea like what I did in what order. Okay. So the Arizona Cardinals pass defense. So we know. So I got to cut this up later. Cardinals pass defense. Quarterbacks have a 101 rating versus them, and they are 29th in completion percentage in the bad way. So the pass defense is not good. Their defense overall is 28th in points per game. Third down defense, they're 29th. Like, I expect CJ to have success. The great thing about right now is that it doesn't matter which receiver is banged up at any given time. He's got 5 viable options. And whether it's Nico Collins, Robert Woods, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson are coming along and used sporadically, but then Dalton Schultz, obviously. So, like, they've got 5 different guys on any given play, and not to mention Devin Singletary, that we feel pretty good about. So his ability to spread that around, his ability to kind of pick and choose which guys are going to be the guys that week, it's versus a bad pass defense. This game, I would bet the Texans on this at only a 4.5 point spread. I feel like this is the ultimate sign of disrespect from both Vegas and the gambling public at large, where I don't think they genuinely believe in the Texans. And to be fair, they did just lose to the Carolina Panthers 3 weeks ago. And I think there's nobody more keenly aware of that than CJ Stroud himself. He made multiple references both after the game and on Wednesday to, understanding the ups and downs of this game, keeping an even keel, all of that. So I did we'll see how it goes. Oh, let me get off of here. There we go. All right, Devin Singletary. Okay, so the emergence of the rushing attack. Oh, you son of a bitch. Look at what a bastard we are. It's Kyler, Matt, Kyler with the douchey reporter, pass defense, total defense. And here we go. Okay. The emergence of the rushing attack, Devin Singletary, 30 attempts, 150 yards. Dalton Schultz blocking. Noah Brown blocking. Devin Singletary gashing here, gashing that guy. Gash all over the place. And a little CJ Stroud. Looks exactly like Kyler Murray, almost. I think this is one thing that I know we've talked about. People nationwide are starting. It's funny. Until Devin Singletary went off, nobody was really talking outside of Houston about how bad the Texans' rushing attack was and that CJ was doing well despite having no support from the run game. All of a sudden, Devin Singletary goes off, and for whatever reason, people realize, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the first time we've really mentioned the running backs at all. I do think the offensive line played better. I think that maybe being able to specialize in a couple things helped a lot. Before it was the whole package. It wasn't the offensive line completely. It wasn't the running backs completely. It was a little bit of everything. It was CJ a little bit. And a lot of things have tightened up. A bunch of you have pointed out, and it's true that, look, it took Gary Kubiak's rushing offense a while, really not until Alex Gibbs Sr. showed up for the rushing offense to take off. I had been nervous about the fact that Bobby Slowick was a pass game coordinator and that the pass game was taken off and the run game was so laggard. Last week was versus a very bad rushing defense where Devin Singletary went off, but the Texans had faced bad rush defenses before and not really done much. So I do feel good, and it was a huge step in the right direction that they're flat out dominant. So the Cardinals are a better rush defense. Not a great one by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a test. Regardless of whether the Texans win, lose, whatever, I would love to see 4+ yards per carry. I mean, the Cardinals have been giving up 4+ yards per carry. If the Texans get 4+ yards per carry, steadily churning out, and really without all the minus plays, because that was the big thing that was hurting them, so many tackles behind the line of scrimmage or stuff, that'd be a big step forward. All right. Texans pass defense gave up 100+ yards to 2 wide receivers last week. They are a quintessential bend but don't break defense, and usually that would scare me, except for this, the fact that they are holding running backs to 3.4 yards per carry. Like, against all odds at the beginning of the season, they've turned into a good rushing defense. The problem is they're not necessarily dependable in the fourth quarter. That's the biggest issue that still makes me nervous. The pass rush, too, in these last couple of weeks. So Sheldon Rankins getting 3 sacks last week, 4 sacks for the group with 9 QB hits. It was a good week for them. Sheldon Rankins really taking advantage of, and I liked him. It was a reasonable amount of dancing. Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins both, they make an impact in the backfield. I think that with this defense early on, I mean, some of the PFF grades, like, sometimes they don't make sense, and sometimes I really don't get them. Back when Connor Barwin was here, I did not understand why PFF hated him so much, and I think part of it was that whenever somebody's being asked to do something unconventional, and Connor had a lot of coverage responsibilities, and a lot of times he was reading the tight end before he started rushing. So they would grade him down because he wasn't getting a great pass rush. We're like, all right, well, he's jamming the tight end before he starts rushing the passer. With the defensive tackles earlier this year, I think the poor linebacker play was actually making the defensive lineman look worse, because when an objective observer is watching and he sees the defensive lineman kind of getting washed, and then the defense gets gashed, it looks like it was all the defensive lineman's fault. Where in this defense, Demeco wants them getting upfield, just blowing and going, and the linebackers got to kind of play jazz music behind it and improvise. And they've gotten a lot better at that. And Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins really just penetrating, making impact plays. They're on the right track defensively.
Modest, humble guys love.
We're all back to the beginning already. Okay, let's see. Let me get out of here, and we'll do. I want to watch the Bobby Slowick press conference because I haven't watched it yet. Take a question. Yeah, I thought you'd like that. Professor X has dropped 2 or 3 passes. Who's Professor X? What am I missing? Oh, Xavier Hutchins. I hadn't heard that one, Professor X. Could you see a scenario where Hutchinson is used similar to how Deebo Samuel is used in San Francisco? I mean, right now, Noah Brown's that guy, isn't he? It's and I think, you mean like directly out of the backfield? Huh. They line everybody up in the backfield at times. Tank Dell, one of the things that set free that Dalton Schultz catch was Tank Dell lining up in the backfield, CJ sending him in motion and figuring out using partly that to figure out what the coverage was, and then partly seeing that safety bail off to figure it out. But Xavier's willingness to just get physical on those end arounds, yeah, I could see him doing that. And like that wide receiver room is like, they're just to a man. They're built the right way. I mean, those guys, they care about run blocking. They drive like hell for run after the catch. Bobby Slowick, I know in his press conference, talked about finding a diversity of different wide receivers, and it really shows up. It's like the mix between young guys and veterans. And I think, like, somehow the leadership in that room, whether it's, Robert Woods has always been a good blocker. I think Tank Dell is just built to be a little junkyard dog. He's cool because he's got that kind of, that feisty Chihuahua nastiness to him, but he doesn't have to act like it. He's not trying to act like he's got a chip on his shoulder, but I think he's just as a matter of survival, he's always had to scrap like that. And man, he does not back down a little bit. There's no backup in him. I remember Robert Smith saying that about Dante Robinson based on something that happened once. A big dude was being kind of a douche to Dante, and I I remember Robert Smith saying, like, there's no backup in that kid, man. Let's see. Oh, Michael, I saw that. It won't let me DM to you on Twitter. Huh. Okay, I'll figure that out, hopefully, man. Is there a reason they don't post the coordinator press conferences anywhere this year? I don't know. You know what? I didn't realize that until after I did the last one, and a bunch of you said that. So I'll try to do those more often. Tank Dell was such a steal. Yeah, I mean, look, Jonathan Mingo went a full round, yeah. Think about this for the Carolina Panthers. Jonathan Mingo, a wide receiver, went a full round ahead of Tank Dell in the draft. And there was one Bryce Young, quarterback, who went a pick before one CJ Stroud in the draft. So can't beat him on the damn football field, but otherwise it was a shellacking of the Carolina Panthers. This is a hack-a-shack. I love your thinking. Who's going to replace Toa Toa? I think. Is Jake playing? Was there an update on Jake? You guys have no idea what my last 24 hours has been like. I do think there's a chance they play more nickel than maybe typical versus these guys. Maybe they let up a little bit in the run, but again, I think the biggest. Well, James Conner is the X factor there. If you're going to try to play nickel more versus the run, James Conner has got that feistiness to him. He's like Tank Dell, but with like 30 extra pounds of body mass. He still runs like he's been disrespected. Hanson, thank you. Oh, Hewitt, that's right. Yeah, Neville Hewitt will be out there. They'll do there'll be a committee affair going on. So let's see who comes up first.
It's fading away.
Hey, all right. I'm sorry, Matt. I don't want to. I'm not trying to diss you, but I want to see Bobby first. And let me tell you guys something else. I know many of you don't want me talking about Bobby Slowick as a head coach candidate, but it's gonna happen. Like, as long as CJ keeps playing like he has, and it's not just that he's playing as well as he is. I feel like there are a lot of. I mean, he's just so freaking smart, and he improvises so well. And it's different than what Brock Purdy was doing last year. Brock Purdy was doing some really, really cool stuff as a rookie. But you got to remember too that I don't know. Early in the year, I was saying, hey, look, Brock Purdy had Deebo Samuel. Brock Purdy had Brandon Ayuk. Brock Purdy had George Kittle. And then you realize, like, all right, well, George Kittle, 5th round pick. Deebo, Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. They have Christian McCaffrey. Oh no, that's right. They got so much talent over there. Okay, I think a couple years from now, people might say like, well, yeah, look, but CJ's got Nico Collins. But yeah, look, CJ's got Tank Dell. Okay, that might be true, but in San Francisco, those guys were already finished products. Like, Brock Purdy stepped in and he was working with finished products. So if a rookie were to hypothetically step in on this team in 2 years, just weird alternate universe, then yeah, maybe then Tank Dell's a finished product. Maybe then Nico Collins, et cetera, all those guys. So for now, though, it's really cool. But look at this smile. This guy that supposedly had no personality. I thought he was going to be like a computer nerd. Damn it. Look at it. He's charming.
Yeah. I sprint over here. You guys don't. No, I'm just kidding. I don't.
You let me know when you're ready. All right. And then we'll start.
Messing with the Zoom.
Okay.
See that? He's gabbing with him.
You're all good, man. What do you got?
Go ahead, guys.
I mean, when you look at each week, the way CJ might process a mistake, what does he do? That's rare. Most times, guys, it takes them a while to catch on to something, but he seems to do it every time, right up next time.
Okay, so the question, if you couldn't hear it, was CJ seems to do something right the next time, every time. Like, he processes, comes back from mistakes, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're referencing is kind of, we talk about short memory at the quarterback position, but a short and permanent memory. Like, you got to be able to move on from any mistakes that happen, whether it's you or anyone else on the offense. And really the hardest part, quite honestly, is getting used to being able to rally everybody and get everybody else moving on with you when someone else on the offense makes a mistake or has a breakdown. Really is almost more difficult than when you yourself have that issue. And he's done awesome with that through the year. I think that's evident by the fact that he's captain. You know, he really cares a lot about making sure everyone else in the huddle that's with him is a better player. And he doesn't forget mistakes either, which pays a lot of dividends. Like there's things that happened 4 weeks ago that can come up again in a game, and he doesn't make the same mistake twice because that rep is banked.
That's what Sean and I, when we were listening to that clip earlier, it sounds like kind of like he's like a gangster, but with himself, like a mafia guy that says like, I might forgive, but I never forget. Like he does that with himself. He forgives, but he doesn't forget. And what did he say? You want a short memory and a permanent memory? Neither of those jibe with my poor working memory. So I know what he's saying there. You just got to be. You can't beat yourself up over it. As far as others messing up and that being more of a concern, I wonder there, because that can mean multiple different things. Like if a guy's just not coming along and he's constantly not running the right routes, then that's a huge headache. But I wondered also if he meant that like a guy beating himself up over it or not. And I can remember, man, with the receivers especially, you know, they have a drop or something early in a game. You don't want anything getting into their head. And I think CJ's never going to be a Peyton Manning where he browbeats people. I think he's much more of a guy that, you know, wants guys to be able to rebound quickly, but he does have very high standards. That'll be interesting to see how it works out over time. You know, like when it comes to, you know, I think Demeco does a really good job of setting high standards, but without being a prick about it. It just, the standards are what the standards are. We talked about this earlier this week with Andy Reid. Like Andy Reid has super high standards and a pain in the ass to play for. But he's not a jerk about it. And I think CJ will probably be like that. The other thing that happens too with quarterbacks is like, you run the right route or you don't get the football. And on this team, that's a very real possibility because there's lots of options.
Coach, without giving away the game plan, why were you all so successful last week in the run game?
I mean, you're good, man. Any mistakes that happen a year, I think that's really is almost more difficult than when you yourself have that issue. And he's done awesome with that through the year.
I had half an IPA and then here I go. So
Get mistakes either, which pays a lot of dividends. Like there's things that happened 4 weeks ago that can come up again in a game, and he doesn't make the same mistake twice because that rep is banked.
Coach, without giving away the game plan, why were you all so successful last week in the run game?
Okay, so without giving away the game plan, why were you all so successful last week in the run game?
I mean, I think we played probably our best game as a unit, you know, just being in sync as far as combinations, being able to run off the ball the way we want to run off the ball. We had some good looks that we took advantage of. And I think leading up to this game, when we got some good looks, we had a breakdown somewhere. And then when plays weren't as clean or weren't as good, I mean, Devin ran his tail off. You know, he was making one guy miss pretty consistently against Cincinnati, which when that happens, you're going to be able to get positive yards in the run game. And for us, just being able to stay on schedule like that is really powerful for what we want to do on offense on first, second down.
The other thing I'd say, too, is when wide receivers are blocking really well, then there is only one guy that has to make a tackle. Early in the season, too, you know, I don't know if there were times they were asking receivers to make some tough blocks as well. I think part of that was also because defenses were trying to be a little bit more exotic, or CJ's scared him off of some of the exotic stuff now. And because of that, I think in some ways that's probably helped out the run game, because when defenses blitz, CJ can make them pay. So they got to be extra mindful of how they're blitzing. Let's see. Somebody said, yeah, I can't see CJ yelling at dudes on the sidelines. I'll tell you, Drew Brees was never a guy that really took guys to task at all, right? I mean, there's a bunch of them. It's just like Manning and Brady were just so psychotically, like, definitely would have been serial killers if they weren't athletes. That I don't know if it was. It's just different. Let's see. Somebody else made a good point. Somebody had talked about the Texans' defense being too small and make arm tackles. I want to say something about that. Oh wait, yeah. No, I'll tell you about the demonetization. I'm just, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. I'm running experiments. Okay, it's not. I'm not. I'm not. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll be all right if I'll be all right if I don't make $100 off this video. It's not a big deal. Slipped up and referred to running as what we want to do on first and second down. Yeah, they did. They've been running more on first down, so I think it's all right. I don't think it's not as big a deal. All right, let's see.
In the fourth quarter, Cincinnati's got one timeout left, about 3 minutes. Third down, decide to go to the air. Next drive, you also go to the air on third down versus.
Wait a second. All right, CC713. I'm noticing a little bit of a negative Nancy appeal here too. You said Panthers beat us. Texans historically love losing these games. CC713 was also the one that said Texans defense is small and arm tackle too much. Okay, I'll address each one of these. Small, I guess you're going to have to define small. I think if you're used to a 3-4, then yeah, they're small. I don't think by 4-3 standards they're particularly small. They do miss too many tackles, and yet at the same time, I'm growing more lenient in that regard because they do swarm to the ball. And they need to get better at tackling, and I think they have incrementally. Like, unfortunately, Denzel Perryman was a much more sound tackler. Christian Harris has gotten a lot better at tackling. One of their poorest tacklers was, in a lot of regards, was Henry To'oTo'o. He just took bad angles to the ball. He's young; he'll grow and get better. So valid point there. I'm on the arm tackling. I'm not so sure about the small part. Because I used to fall into that same trap until I realized that it's not 1997 yet. Yeah, the Panthers beat us. CJ has mentioned that. I've mentioned it. Everybody's mentioned it. I mean, the Eagles lost to the Jets. Like that's life in the NFL. And the Texans at this point still aren't a proven, like they're not like gonna right now. They haven't shown that they're a Super Bowl contender. They've beat a bunch of playoff teams. I don't know if that matters to you or not. But they beat a bunch of playoff teams. Texans historically loves losing these games. Like, all right, you're talking about a uniform more so than okay, is it Demeco Ryans head coach? Does he love losing these games? Does CJ love losing these games? Are various players from the defense, like Sheldon Rankins? I don't know. Like, is like, we going back? How far are we going back here? 10, 15 years? Come on, man. Get your head in the game. We need you. CC713. Jeez. Okay.
Run play, burn the clock. What goes into that decision, and how do you feel like that? Obviously one was an interception.
Okay, so he's asking about the 2 passes on third down, I believe, or at least this is what leads to Bobby Slowick. Listen carefully. Does he say that they shouldn't have passed the ball on either of those third downs?
Did you want to maybe adjust the decision-making process?
Yeah. The first third down you're referencing, the one that was an interception, that was poor play call. That probably for me, looking back on it, I know why it was called. We know what we were expecting to get, which isn't what we got. But regardless, it was a really hard position to put the quarterback in. And that one, I really didn't like that play call. Like, if I was to judge myself, that was probably the worst play call of the year. The second third down, at that point, when it's a 3-point game, you're calling the play that you believe has the highest chance to move the chains, because if you move the chains, like, the game's over, and if you don't move the chains, they still, even if we burn 40 seconds off the clock, there was still plenty of time left for them to go down the field. So at that point, you're just calling the play that you feel like is going to give you the best chance to move the sticks, and we wound up having to get to the last option in the play call, which was good by CJ getting there, and it was a good route by Tank, and the DB made a really nice play on that.
Yeah, as far as like the first play call, I don't think that he's saying that he shouldn't have passed there. I know that if you run the ball there, then it's almost impossible for Joe Burrow to score twice in less than 4 minutes. I get all that. I think you're at a point where you got to be able to trust CJ Stroud that in that situation, and I think the DB knew that play was coming and he jumped the route. I think more than anything, Slowick isn't upset that he called the pass play. It's called that he called the predictable play, and that he anticipated a different look from the defense. I think he would have just called a different pass play or a different run play, but just anything different than that specific play. CJ up to that point had thrown 1 interception. for the most part, he'd been very clean. He got lucky a couple times. He could have thrown more interceptions. But in that moment, that's part of being a veteran quarterback where, all right, you either make the safe throw or you eat it, maybe try to scramble for a first down or something. I'm okay with it there. I didn't think that was the worst thing in the world. As far as the Cardinals not being the same team, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Somebody else had mentioned that I think you must have you probably joined us just recently because we were talking about James Conner and McBride, Trey McBride, the tight end. Trey McBride that kid's a beast, and he had 8 or 9 receptions last week. The Texans have been horrible versus tight ends, so when you're down one of your starting linebackers, yeah, that's a big deal. You just can't look. I don't. If Trey McBride single-handedly beats us, then they got more problems than just that. But it is an issue. And yes, I 100% agree. I think the Cardinals defense played better just having Kyler Murray back. They held the Falcons to like 70 yards passing. And I know it was a combination of Ritter and the former Texans player there, former Texans great, but it wasn't like they looked like a different group out there. So I 100% agree. It's not the same Cardinals from the first half of the season.
We might be more than a week away from this. But how do you anticipate putting Dameon Pierce back into the role with Devin Singletary kind of getting?
Yeah, nothing's changed. I've kind of been.
Oh, okay. So he was asked if Devin Singletary's role will change if Dameon Pierce comes back or when Dameon Pierce comes back.
Saying this for a while, I really believe in having guys that, can distribute carries. I think that keeps you fresh as the game keeps going, especially through the course of a season. I know Motor, I think, had 30 carries last game. You have 30 carries in multiple games. That adds up fast. We don't want to put that on any one player. So it really won't be any different than it was before. I know DP's working his tail off to try to get back as soon as he can. When that happens, we'll roll.
I think with Dameon Pierce, the frustrating thing has been that, a lot of times it was the blocking. A lot of times it was the blocking that was the issue. There were other times where on zone runs and otherwise where he was second guessing himself in an Alfred Blue type fashion. And that was what was weird. And I think that, that might go back to last year. Remember, before he got injured, for a couple weeks there, he was running into brick walls and his yards per carry had gone way down. And I almost wonder if he had started just thinking and processing too much to the point where, kind of like when a young quarterback has bad blocking in front of him, it can mess up the clock in his head. I feel like Dameon just somehow got out of the rhythm of running the football. So I'm hoping with a little bit of time on the sideline, and then when he comes back with the offensive line actually hopefully blocking like they did last week, that we'll see a much different version. I mean, we've seen a different version of Devin Singletary in the last couple of weeks than we did previously too. He was struggling with the blocking. So I've got fingers crossed that'll be all right.
I'm not too sure how much you can explain this. Obviously, you put it in your recording, but how effective is the career progression for a young quarterback? Well, how helpful, not effective, but how helpful can it be?
I think he asked how helpful is being pure progression as a passer, like being a progression passer. How does that help a young quarterback? Which I'll say, one of the plays I'd watched just before I got on here was when CJ rolled off to the left and then shoulder shimmied and then hit somebody to the right. I can't remember who it was, but kind of exploiting the half field read, turning it into a full field progression. Like they've been doing some cool stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in the NFL that's changed. Even just, it's not like I've been on offense for a decade, but even just from my time going on defense over to offense, like when I started on defense, there was a significant amount of pre-snap recognition, half-field reads. It was all over what we were defending. And I think the NFL in general has trended a lot more towards pure progression plays. That doesn't say that's not to say like half-field reads don't exist anymore or isolations don't exist anymore. They definitely do. Everyone has them. It's just pure progressions become a lot more prevalent. But the guys that I think get really good at it still use pre-snap recognition to be able to empower themselves post-snap. And that really, I think, is across the entire league where people have found it being useful. You don't need to have all the answers to the test, but you can have the clues before the snap. And then you can trust your training, you can trust your scheme, and you can trust the players that we're getting the ball to help give you the answer during the play. That's really where I think, like I said, across the NFL, I think that's been very powerful, especially for young quarterbacks that are still getting in their even 4th, 5th, 6th year in the NFL.
Yeah, I think, Orlovsky was talking about that. We watched Greg Cosell talk about that earlier. CJ, it's not just CJ. A lot of the younger quarterbacks, but CJ especially, obviously, is doing it better than anybody else. They've just had so many more reps. I think between Madden, YouTube, 7-on-7. I can't cite 7-on-7 anymore because it's been a long time now that 7-on-7 has been prevalent. I think maybe it's a combination of 7-on-7 plus colleges have had to progress beyond. CJ at Ohio State was not just running the air raid. So I think there's just in the NFL, as the NFL has incorporated more of the college stuff, like those two worlds have merged. And I wonder if that helps too, is just that NFL teams kind of, when they started incorporating college stuff, I think they almost dumbed it down more than they needed to, just because the NFL coaches themselves were kind of dumb about a lot of the zone read stuff and the RPOs, that they can just throw so many different things at a defense now that it's kind of the pendulum swung back towards. I was about to say it swung back towards the offense, but offense is down this year. That's partly because of rookie quarterbacks and injuries and all that, but whatever. I'm pontificating too much.
Speaking of young quarterbacks, how much did your time in San Francisco working with 2 other young quarterbacks kind of like give you a blueprint on what works well for a young quarterback and what doesn't work well?
Yeah.
So he was asked about, and thank you, Murray. Nice to Murray McDougall. What an awesome Scottish name. He was asked about how much it helped working with all those young quarterbacks in San Francisco. How's he been able to transfer that over to here?
I'd say it was massive. I think anytime you go through that experience, that empowers your next experience, and being there with Trey, being there with Brock, understanding what they like, just learning what they were good at, what they got comfortable with, what maybe they needed to work on and weren't always so comfortable with, and how to adjust around that to those particular individuals, because they're different players. It just opens up. I wouldn't really call it a blueprint. I'd call it more, you're just prepared to build a relationship, react, and fit what you're doing into someone's skill set, strengths, and even avoid if someone has a weakness, and being able to go through that process twice definitely helps. I mean, the third time you go through it, it doesn't mean it's clean, but it definitely helps.
I think, look, we've talked about this a bunch, how they kind of have a syllabus for these quarterbacks, and that's why they didn't make CJ the starter right away. I know. Bryce Young won the competition to be the first starter named. And then Anthony Richardson won that competition to be the first starter named. But like, I think in a lot of ways it would be like, somebody going through classes in school and not actually doing all the work for the first one, and not actually even taking all the tests and then progressing on to the next grade and the next grade. They don't like doing it that way. And it's nice because that makes it, honestly, I would imagine that's very much in the minority of NFL offenses where they're very, very strict and structured in how they go about teaching everything. They might think they are, but they're more approaching it just as like kind of we're going to install all these plays and see what happens. I think in San Francisco, the way people describe it and the way Kyle Shanahan has described it, they very much are trying to figure out like, okay, can this guy master this skill? Okay, if he's mastered this skill, can we master the next one? Can we master the next one? They're not going to go from like learning to juggle 3 balls to learning to juggle 6 all at once. They got to step their way up and stay away from school zones.
Go through your 2-minute drills every week, but how much of it is when the game's on the line like that, with Tampa Bay, with the last game you all played, how much of it is your play calling predicated towards what CJ can do?
Yeah.
So I think that was Sarge, and I think he was asking, when the game is on the line, how much is the game plan predicated towards what CJ can do?
All that situational football, especially at the end of half in the game, starts with the quarterback. So a lot of it. And then the closer you get to crunch time, like I'm a big believer in players over plays. I feel that strongly. And I think that shows Like if you go back and someone had the aptitude to watch, what we had called in these specific situations and then recall what we had been doing in camp, a lot of it is pretty similar, because a lot of the plays we've been doing for a long time, I'm really calling and putting out there because I want a play that our quarterback's really comfortable with and that I think our players are really good at. And we'll figure the look out post-snap and try to get the ball where it needs to go. But that's really where it starts for me all the way through in 2 minutes. And you can't do that if you don't have an immense amount of trust in the eligibles and particularly the quarterback.
I think obviously particularly the quarterback. But when he said the eligibles there too, again, this is one thing that always happens in any kind of Kubiak Shanahan system is Bobby there is talking about how they've been running a lot of the same things and similar things. As soon as you don't get the right guys running it, then all of a sudden it becomes super predictable because everything is. There's a couple concepts here. One is that everything needs to look the same. That's when you talk about a Kubiak Shanahan system, every guy puts his own spin on it. And, Kyle Shanahan does a lot of stuff that was way different than what Gary Kubiak was doing when Kyle first came to Houston. But everything looks the same. So the run blocking's got to look like the pass blocking on the play action and everything. Like you got to major in deception on that. And then the other is the illusion of complexity. So, you might be able to run the same play out of 7 different looks or what have you. You just got to make the defense think and make them think that more is going on than there actually is. It's like any magic trick. You ever learn the secret to a magic trick? It sucks because you're like, oh, this magic trick that was simple. No, that's a dumb trick. Even though you're totally flabbergasted, it's a dumb trick. That's what happens with this offense if you don't have the right guys running it. And it happened with Kubiak when he didn't have the right guys in various years. It becomes predictable because guys have tells. The guys are not paying attention to detail. Guys just aren't fast enough to threaten deep. So everything gets jumped. And right now, the cool thing is that they're doing it. The eligibles are doing it as much with just attention to detail as they are with natural athleticism. It's, Tank Dell's doing it with both, but it's a combination of the two. It's really cool.
From a blocking standpoint, when the guys are all giving off the ball, it looks a certain way, like maybe back in the area in Foster, zone being scared. Does that feel like the first time that this is exactly how we want in terms of timing and the way everybody blocks it, receivers, tight ends, offensive line?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's exactly.
I guess it was Aaron just asking about the fact that it looks like the offense. Looks like the offensive line, everybody's blocking well. I don't know what the question was.
We're
all right, I got to listen to that again. Just ask a question. We got Andre Johnson on the pregame tomorrow, by the way. If you care, Sports Radio 610. I think Andre's going to be on at 11 a.m. on Sports Radio 610. Sean and I will be asking. Feed me some questions for Andre.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's exactly. Nobody's perfect, and we're not quite there yet. We know we still got work to do, but I would say it was definitely our best game. As we use the term running off the ball. That's really important to us at all positions: O-line, receiver, tight end. Just being able to get on their side of the line of scrimmage as fast as we can, and that was definitely something we did against Cincinnati, and it stood out. And it's easy to say that. It's really hard to put into action and to do when you're working on a combination versus different looks, different techniques, and D linemen that are trying to do the same thing. So it takes a lot of trust in the guy next to you. So I kind of reference back to all of it is continuity and trust in the guys that are next to you to be able to do that, and trust in the back that he's going to make the right cut, and trusting that the receivers are going to be able to dig out the safety so that it all fits together. And I would say for us in the run game, that was by far our best trust game. And I think we got to keep building on that.
Yeah, and I think that's what it looked like early in the season was guys just a little haphazard and uncertain. They didn't know exactly, with the combo blocks, especially if you think about the center and the guard and tackle working together when they're on a zone. One guy's got to know when the other guy is leaving, and that takes time. And it's kind of you can only get so good at it in practice. That's where I knew intellectually that I should be patient with Bobby Slowick and how much he was running the ball despite sucking at running the ball, because you got to get those reps in the game to actually get it to work. And yet emotionally, I couldn't go there. So I appreciate Bobby's insistence on sticking with it, because at least for last week, it looked like it really started to bite. So hopefully this week too, it'll bite. Cardinals are a better run defense than the Bengals were. So this is a bigger test for them.
Is there an analogy that you could use to best demonstrate how far CJ Stroud has come in this offense from OTAs to this point?
Okay, so he was curious if there's an analogy that, and that was Sean Bajani. Sean Bajani asked if there's an analogy he could use to illustrate how far CJ has come in this offense.
I don't know if there'd be an analogy, but
I've got an analogy for you. It's like a porn star pre and post Viagra.
I would say
A male porn star.
His feet would be the thing that sticks out to me. Like, and I don't. It's not like I can point at any one thing or one story. But
it's not an analogy.
But to me, like every game, every time I would think an opponent turns on the tape and watches our pass game, like his feet are settled more and more and more every week, and his drops are smoother, and it's more tempoed and in rhythm. And I think that's, even if you don't understand what you're looking at, I think that's evident to people, just to be able to see if something looks natural or maybe if someone's working through something, and how calm and composed he's become in the pocket. I think is probably the best example of just an outward demonstration of how in command he is of what's going on and how ready he is at any time to hit number one or hit number two or snap back to the backside and get to last in the progression on a lot of stuff. And he's come a long way in that regard. And that's along with a defense that was throwing a lot at us in Cincinnati. Like, they upped the pressure amount against us more so than they had against some other teams, and he didn't blink. And I think that's huge.
It's one interesting thing about the Cardinals. They don't blitz a lot. Remember Jonathan Gannon was under all kinds of criticism in Philadelphia last year because they felt like he didn't blitz enough. Even as the defense was playing awesome, they didn't blitz enough for the Philly fan base. And he's brought that to Arizona. They don't blitz a lot. CJ is really good versus the blitz, so I don't think that Jonathan Gannon will probably switch up. Maybe he will. Maybe they'll just go, break some of their molds. But for whatever it's worth, too, I mean, the Eagles were banged up a bunch and have had some issues personnel-wise, but they're not as good a defense this year as when Jonathan Gannon was there. So that I think, yes, it's obvious that I think Kyler Murray makes a difference on this offense, especially he might, even if he's not consistent. Maybe if he doesn't get consistent, he's still a guy that on any given Sunday could really ruin your Sunday. Likewise with the defense, whenever there's a new coach, Jonathan Gannon, defensive-minded coach, it's going to take a little while for things to kick in, and this might be that point where all of a sudden the Cardinals are a much better defense they were in the first half of the season. Oh, one thing. As far as his feet, one of you, I think Tiff mentioned, Drew. And that's a big change in training camp. He was clicking his heels every now and then. He looked like he was a little jittery at times, and that's just been the opposite. He's just nails with it now. He keeps his feet nice and wide. The biggest thing that's changed, I think, is he's got an understanding now of when he has time to plant his feet, where there were times early in the season, this is classic because college kids can get away with it, where he just they'll just throw without any regard to their feet at all when they're on the run. They'll just throw to the sideline, and their upper body will be disconnected from their lower body. He wasn't as bad as a lot of rookies, but he was doing that a little bit. And he's like, I can't think of an instance where he's done that now. He's got a really good feel. There was a play a couple weeks ago where he was scrambling to his right, and I know that he knew there was a free rusher behind him because that's the guy that made him flee the pocket, was the guy coming from his left. And he stopped and planted and threw to Dalton Schultz, I think. It was really, that was a huge difference from what he'd been earlier in the year.
Demeco question, not a Nico question.
Thank you for clarifying.
When was the first time you realized,
Oh, okay. So this question was, when did you first realize that Demeco might be a good coach? Something along those lines.
Well, I spent, like our first year in San Francisco, we basically were in the room together all the time. It take, maybe a minute to realize he's going to be a good coach. It's like, hey, how you doing? I'm Bobby. I'm Demeco. Oh yeah, I watched you play. And then 30 seconds of talking ball, and you're like, oh yeah, he's gonna be really good. So that doesn't take long. And then like just the development from all of us, like me included, but just being able to be with him as we went through the process, because it was a new scheme for both of us. We both came from 3-4 defensive backgrounds at the time, and learning a new like 4-3 defense, how fast he could clue in to important triggers that linebackers had to know, little nuggets that not necessarily everyone else would notice, that he could kind of distribute to the players or give to our coordinator, Robert Saleh, or the linebacker coach at the time. Like he was able to fit into what we were doing there that neither of us had been exposed to really fast, and I think that only amplified as time went on. So, to me, that was as good an indicator as any as far as football. This guy's going to be really successful.
Yeah, I think one of you said something here. Yeah, this is 100% true. I knew that. Like, I was a 10th year player when he was a rookie, and I could tell. I didn't think about him necessarily going to coaching. He was just a rookie at the time, but he was just he was on a different plane, and it wasn't just the mental side of things. And that would come over time, because I only saw him as a rookie. I could tell that he was super conscientious, and I could tell that he hustled his butt off. But you build that knowledge base over time to get to the point where you can call out plays and everything. But you could see that all that stuff was there, and that he just had a different type of maturity and patience about him. It was the weird part about it too, was that it was coupled with being such a ferocious player. That was a really cool part, is that he's super fiery, but also can just dial it back immediately. So that dual nature was really cool, but not in a shady way. He's not two-faced. He's very transparently like vicious and then nice.
Draft's pretty high in the draft. They draft a quarterback. The team's usually surrounded by a lot of young pieces. In this situation, CJ isn't surrounded by necessarily a bunch of young guys. He also has a very veteran offensive line, some veteran receivers, and veteran tight end. How much has those veterans helped CJ's development process?
I think it's huge.
Okay, so he's asked about how much the veterans have helped CJ's development process.
We kind of approach this year just trying to get diversity, in like skill sets and ages. Guys that have been around the NFL and been on really successful teams like Shaq, like Dalton, like Robert Woods, Noah Brown, those guys, but then also fill it in with some guys that are, young and will be able to come in and grow with CJ like a tank. Nico was already here, but he'd be a great example. Mechie, we intentionally wanted a lot of variance in skill set. We wanted variance in age group. I think all that helps a lot. And I would reference back to when we were talking about the two experiences I've been through before, with young quarterbacks. Just having all veterans is great, but also sometimes you can feel left out. And having all young guys, you miss some of the veteran leadership that you need. So having the balance of both, I think just really helps grow not only him, but it grows the team.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, he wanted out of there by then. That was a long appearance by Bobby Slowick. I don't know if I've got it in me to do.
Let's go.
All right, you got
again. That room's.
I don't know. I gotta get going. Let me take a couple questions first. I had this. What was this beer? This is not an advertisement. It's just sitting in the fridge here in the studio. Cali Boy, West Coast style IPA. Which I realize now that I had an IPA, that's like I gotta wait an extra half hour. 7.5% alcohol. Jeez, you people are crazy with your IPAs. It's a cool. So it's a cool label. I see we got the Bryce Young discussion going on. All you guys talking about bringing back the dinosaurs are funny. None of these guys will be able to play a whole quarter. Besides, who would you want to replace on the roster we have? I would imagine, Rick, I think they're talking about just JJ, right? If they're talking about Cushing, they're talking about him as a coach, I would imagine. If they're talking about me, they're just messing with me. Right? Am I wrong? I haven't been able to monitor the comments because I get too distracted. Let's see. Man, have to get Love Street Carbach. Yeah, I know. Listen, man, I'm telling you, I have Carbach, Bobby. This is what was out there. I didn't pay for it. This is it's based out of Katy. So it's called Cali Boy, but it's based out of Katy. West Coast style IPA. That's all right, man. Bryce has done Zip. That's true. Address your JJ thoughts. What would you do? He's not coming back. I don't think he's not coming back. He's not coming back. Need nice cold Coors. Thank you, retired Row. Pulling up tomorrow squad better. Oh, nice. You, Kush, JJ, and Andre. Okay. Me, 100% no. Unless if I do the old Latimer trick from the program, just sauce up and then use a catheter to swap out my pee, which I can't imagine works. If it does, though, I'm not doing it. I wonder if I do it. Like, what if I got like all no? Because even if I like tried to do steroids or something, then I would tear a tendon immediately. Like immediately. I don't think I'd even ever make it to the practice field. I'd tear a biceps or biceps, triceps, quad, Achilles, like classic roid guy injuries. Not to say that everybody who gets those injuries is on roids. It's just that guys on roids tend to get those injuries a lot. I was talking to a doctor who was a USFL doctor back in the day, maybe for Houston, maybe for somebody else. But everybody knows the USFL was crazy because those were all guys that a lot of them were on the fringe already and there was no testing. Remember, they had a huge syringe and like a huge statue of a syringe, as a joke in the locker room with the gamblers. But he said that they had so many torn biceps and triceps like every year. And back in, and you saw it more in baseball too. If you look at injury logs from the 90s, there's a lot of triceps and biceps. So then when you're 48, that's a whole different deal. Yep. I go to every home game. I'm there doing the pregame show out by the Modella. There's a the Modelo Beer Garden, like right out there in the southeast between the Dome on the south end between the Dome and NRG, where the Modelo Beer Garden is. We've got the stage set up there. We do the pregame. Keep Kush as far away from this roster as possible. 100 million guaranteed would get you. Yeah. Can you imagine? I'd come back. We had a guy in college once who showed up, and this kid was jacked. Like, he looked like a bodybuilder. And he ended up being on the team for like 2 weeks. And then he got an abscess in his buttock, which like is classic dudes getting infected injection or something. But the story he concocted was that he saw somebody breaking into his car, so he ran out to stop him, and the guy stabbed him with a screwdriver. That was at Cornell. So he's a really smart kid. Let's see. Excess hypertrophy. Bryce has to make it work just like CJ, different O-line, receivers in and out. Yeah. Overtraining syndrome. Just a run-stop specialist. I can't be without the steroid, dude, I can't do anything right now. I can't walk. If you see me walking tomorrow, like I've got Achilles tendonitis just from standing around too much. There's no way in hell. I'm out there at training camp, man. I watch these guys. They look like monsters. I don't know. There's no way. I'm not stepping foot on anywhere. I would look stupid in the pants. My legs are skinny now. It would be awful. He stopped them ass first. Botox went wrong. It was before the days. Tiff. This is Tiff. I'm 48 years old. There was no Botox back then. If there was, it was like strictly to be used as a poison. Before they realized that, like, oh no, it's a poison, but tiny amounts of it can make you look younger. I don't know when Botox came in, but it was way after I was in college. If we lose, I'll jump off a bridge. Make it into a creek or something. It'd be fine. What pieces are needed to be a Super Bowl contender within 3 years? That's a good question. They've beat several playoff teams already. They knocked the Bengals out of the playoffs. So, and I don't think they're coming back. So I would say a little bit. It's more depth than anything. I don't know, man. I'm and like with the little asterisk here that like a 6 seed can win the Super Bowl with the right stretch. CJ changes a lot of the calculus behind it because he's shown that you can win a shootout. And if you feel like you can win a shootout, then it's a matter of, okay, how do we feel making an actual run? I would say at least one genuine bona fide stud at linebacker and then one genuine bona fide stud at cornerback. That's there. I'd call him a contender then. You need to, and then I think maybe Will Anderson and or John Grenard. Like that'll be the interesting thing with John Grenard. Like if John Grenard doesn't stick around, you got to replace John Grenard. So I always feel like you got to have at least a stud, even if it's not a good defense. You got to have a genuine playmaker that can come up and be that guy in the fourth quarter. And right now they don't have enough of those guys on defense. Offense, I think they could do it. Like they can be a good enough offense, especially with one more year of advancement by CJ. They just need more playmakers on defense. So I guess I'm formulating what my wish list is for the draft this year. I don't know what the wow is for. Please clarify. Pierce at the end of the season will be scary. I hope so, man. This is a tough thing, though, Coach. Like, you need a bell cow halfback. Like, I guess. I don't know, man. Like, you don't really, you don't in the NFL anymore. And when you do have one, it ends up like Derrick Henry's a bell cow. They built the offense around him. So it's nice to have if you have one. But in the modern NFL, if you got a quarterback, there's your offense. And you can find guys to play tailback. You can find Devin Singletary. So I'm not as fixated on that. It's just not. It's not what it's like. It's been shown time and time again that you don't need one to win a Super Bowl. And when you do have one, like 90% of the time, you end up giving the guy a deal, and he ends up tearing an Achilles or doing something. So I disagree with you there. I'm not saying that it can't help. I just don't think you need one. Cards can give Texas all they can stand tomorrow. Yeah, I think no, I like if you've just joined us, look, I don't think anybody's under any illusion that the Cardinals are going to be a different team in the second half of the season than they were in the first half of the season. I love the Josh Dobbs story. He seems like a hell of a guy. I know he's super, super smart and all that, but Kyler Murray, especially with an actual NFL offensive coordinator, I think we might see the best version of Kyler Murray. The one thing I was wondering about, I was curious if Cards fans felt this. I thought he looked plenty athletic and super fast, and obviously he ran like 90 yards total on that 30-yard run that he had on that final drive. There were a couple times when he was decelerating where it still looked like he was a little like hitching a little bit, and I don't know if that was just a habit from rehab and just being careful. And I don't know, Julius Harris. I guess I linked on that. DT and LB. Yeah, like defensive line or just like up through the middle between the ends in general. I think a lot of the free. I'm just hitting these randomly, by the way. Everybody, don't get offended if I didn't get you. Oh, the injection story you told. Yeah, that guy. Oh, I won't say his name. It was frustrating because it's not his name was enough that it could have gotten confused with somebody else, and it was frustrating to me. So for those of you who missed the story, go back. Hey, tune in tomorrow. The pregame show starts at 9 a.m. Central. Sean and I, if you're going to the game, are at across from the Modelo Beer Garden between NRG and the Astrodome, and might do a quick another little just a genuine recap. Like I know at the beginning of this thing I talked more about quarterbacks than anything else, but a lot to get excited about tomorrow. I think the biggest concerns are obviously Kyler Murray and then Trey McBride, the tight end, because the Texans have been so bad against tight ends, and now they're down multiple safeties and linebackers. This Trey McBride kid is feisty, very, very feisty. I expect the Texans, if I know defensive coaches, Demeco and those guys have been showing film of Trey McBride all week and showing how Trey McBride thinks that he's nastier than everybody else. He likes to preen a lot. He gets up and he gets his angry face, very angry, this Trey McBride afterwards. And then I looked up, I Googled him, and even his basketball highlights in high school, very angry all the time. He's one of those guys. So let's keep him angry tomorrow. Have a great one, everybody.